Kids, it feels like it's been forever. I miss you. I hope that you're having a good time with your family, staying safe, staying inside. But kids, I just got to tell you, I'm so impressed by the amount of you guys that are doing your homework every single day. I seriously think by the time you're done with all this, you are still going to know a ton about medieval world history, which leads us today to one of my favorite topics. Now, today's topic is a crime scene investigation. If you've ever watched CSI or Criminal Minds, you are going to love this assignment because a crime was committed in the year 1096. It is up to you today to figure out what is that crime and, more importantly, who is responsible. Now, before we get into anything, I got to tell you the location of the crime. So take a look at this map. Now, I'll try and get my big head out of the way. There we go. So this is a map of the city known as Jerusalem. This is an overhead shot of it, and you could see that it's divided into four sections. Over here, the Christian quarter, here, the Muslim quarter, down here, the Jewish quarter, and right here, shout out to Miss Churchian, the Armenian quarter. Now, what I want you to think about is using this map. So what problems can you predict might actually happen in the city? I want you to notice a few things. This key up here shows that this distance is 300 meters. That's the size of a football field. So if you were to take this and supplant it over this area is not big at all. Maybe at most it's the length of 3 or 4 football fields, but you could probably guess that there is a massive problem that will probably erupt. I'm sure you've already figured this out, but if you have Christians and Muslims and Jews and Armenians all living within a very tiny little area, there is going to be massive amounts of conflict, which is exactly what happens here. Now, on Monday, what you guys learned about is you learned about the Vikings. The Vikings came down from the north and they started invading Europe. Then on Tuesday, what you guys started looking at is you started looking at the invasions from the east, the Magyars and the Mongols invading Europe from the east. Now, today, what we're going to look at is we are going to look at some invasions that happened coming up from the south. Specifically, if you're a Christian living in Europe, you feel that you are being invaded by these people, the Muslims. Now, something happened in the year 1096, something as violent and gory as you could possibly imagine. Now, the reason why the city of Jerusalem was so important is that a guy called Jesus Christ, a man who was very important to the Jewish faith, to the Christian faith, and the Muslim faith, he was crucified in this city. In fact, the last week of his life all took place within the city of Jerusalem. Now, if you're a Christian, this guy here is particularly important because if you're a Christian, you believe that this guy, Jesus, is actually the Son of God. And him being crucified in the city is abundantly important because you believe that God was killed in the city of Jerusalem. Now, here's the problem. Because of the great importance of the city of Jerusalem, Jews, Christians, and Muslims all lived in that city. Think back to the warm-up. They lived inside the city walls, but the city was small. Now, if you're a Christian and you believe one thing, and you're a Jew and you believe another thing, and you're a Muslim and you believe another thing, you're all living in a tiny amount of land surrounded by people that believe in different things than you. As you can imagine, that is going to lead to conflict. Now, this conflict erupts in the year 1096. Violence breaks out. And when we're talking about violence, we are talking about violence like we have not even talked about in this class thus far. Now, I want you to notice a couple things in this image here. We have these gentlemen over here. These, as you guys know, are known as knights. And if you look very closely, you can start seeing that these knights are probably coming from Europe. We talk about Europe, and in Europe, there are knights. Now, if they are from Europe, what religion do they follow? You got it. They follow the religion of Christianity. Now, over here is a people group that maybe looks a little bit unfamiliar, but you have to think way back to what we've talked about earlier on this school year. And you could probably deduce that these people over here follow the religion of Islam. I want you to notice, see this crescent moon? This is the symbol of Islam. Now, if you look a lot closer, what you start seeing is the graphic and gory violence that is playing out in the year 1096. If you look down here, these are severed heads. This is a severed leg. This is another severed leg. When we're talking about the violence in 1096, this is not pretty stuff. In fact, you are going to read some very, very, very gruesome and violent primary sources today that I want you to pay particular attention to. Now, the reason why a lot of this violence happened is because the Pope made a promise. Now, the Pope, living in Europe at the time, makes a promise to the Christian army. He says, this is a direct quote from the Pope. This is a primary source from the quote. Now, let me read it to you. Now, we hope that none of you will be killed, but I want you to know that heaven will be given as a reward to those who will be killed in this war. For God knows that they lost their lives fighting for the truth of Christianity, for the preservation of their country, and for the defense of Christians, and therefore God will give them the reward of heaven. Now, the Pope is giving a promise to the Christians. If you were in real life, I would have you guys discuss what is the promise that the Pope is giving, but I want you guys to pay very close attention. He says, I really hope that nobody is killed in this, but I want you to know the reward of heaven will be given to those killed in this war. In other words, the Pope is saying to the Christians, if you go and fight for the city of Jerusalem, and if you die fighting for Christianity, I promise you that you will automatically go to heaven. Now, you can imagine that people hearing the voice of the Pope, remember, the church, as you studied yesterday, is more important than anything else in all of Europe. If the Pope says to do something, you have to do it. The Pope is the literal voice of God, and the Pope is saying, if you go to Jerusalem and you fight for Christianity, and even if you die, you will automatically go to heaven. So, what happened is people went and fought. So what you're going to look at today is you're going to look at the crime committed. What you're going to look at is A, what is the crime, and B, who is responsible for this crime. Kids, we're going to pick up on this topic tomorrow. This is a two-parter, so enjoy today. I think you're really going to find this one fascinating, and I will see you back here tomorrow.